Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. If you like the show, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, once again, we have Frank Pisani. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good. I'm looking forward to chatting with you about this.
Excellent. Indeed, yes. Today we are going to be talking all about National Treasure, Edge of History, now that Season 1 has wrapped up. We originally did the first episode of Edge of History back the end of 2022. It had been out a couple of weeks at that time, I think, and Logan basically pitched it as hey, let's do that. And you and I... 3 weeks were out, or 3 episodes were out basically by that point in time, 3 or 4. And you and I basically went above and beyond the assignment and got really hooked and kept watching the show. And so, Logan did not, I don't think, keep up with it. So that's why he's not here joining us or returning. But yeah, Frank and I watched the entire series, which wrapped up this week, or Season 1, because they're seemingly teasing Season 2 stuff. So yeah, that's what we're gonna sit down and chat about it. And for what it's worth, as we typically do in these episodes, will be full spoilers for the series. So if you haven't watched it, and you care about that kind of thing, maybe go finish watching the series and then come back and enjoy this podcast. A lot of the usual rigmarole is basically just going to be the copy paste, so I probably won't spend a ton of time doing that. If you want that, you can go back and listen to our previous episode on this. But the history lesson here, the series was originally released between December 14th, 2022 and February 8th, 2023. And then just as a reprise, the original National Treasure was released back November 19th, 2004, and National Treasure Book of Secrets was December 21st, 2007. So we're here almost 20 years removed from the original National Treasure, revisiting that. Some other releases that we had from the time of the original National Treasure. We had Team America World Police, October 15th of 2004. We had the original Saw film was October 29th. The Incredibles was November 5th. Alongside National Treasure, we had the original SpongeBob SquarePants movie, came out November 19th. Following up with that, we had Blade Trinity in December 8th, sorry, and Ocean's 12 on December 10th. And we had the Jim Carrey, Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, December 17th. And then, as I joked about last time, we had the odd sandwich of The Aviator, Fat Albert, and The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou on December 25th that year. That was an odd Christmas day at the movies, if you were out there going, seeing everything.
Something for everybody.
Indeed. So our runtime here, we average between 45 and 51-minute episodes across the 10-episode series. In the Disney Plus original live-action programming timeline of things, we had... we had Andor that started back in September of 2022. We had the MCU special presentation Werewolf by Night on October 7th. The Santa Clauses began November 16th. The Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special was November 25th. We had Willow started November 30th. Then we had National Treasure Edge of History here starting in December. Mandalorian Season 3 will be kind of the next big thing up on the slate, March 1st of 2023, so about a little less than a month away from now. Then we have also here in 2023, we have Secret Invasion, which is slated for early 2023. And I forget if they have given us a date on that yet. I don't think they have. Loki Season 2 will be mid-2023, and Ahsoka will be coming out here in 2023 as well. So when we did the first episode, I had specifically who the director for that episode was, who the writers were. This, unlike a lot of the other series we've seen on Disney Plus, basically every episode was a different director. So I did not pull in all of their credentials and stuff, but I will run through who they were. We had Nathan Hope directed a couple episodes, as well as Sherwin Shalati directed 2 episodes. Mira Nair had directed that first episode, so we talked about her a little bit in the last time we did this. Antonio Nigret, Monica Raymond, Kevin Alejandro, Laura Belzi, and Brad Tenenbaum all directed one episode apiece across the run. And our writers, we had Cormac and Marianne Wibberley were the primary showrunners for the series. They had also written the screenplay of the original movies, as well as Charlie's Angels, Full Throttle, and Bad Boys 2. And then we had the based on characters created by of Jim Koff, Oren Aviv, and Charles Seegers, who also all worked on the original. I don't think they were heavily involved in this. I think they basically just got the honorarium credit there. But other writers we had across the series were Gabriel Yanis, Maura Milan, Daya Mishra, Rick Muragi. I should have looked at these names more beforehand. John Paul Nickel, Paola Villegas Soruco, Sasha Stroman, and Dwayne Worrell were our writers across the series. Like I said, I've gotten so used to it being we had one writer across all 6 episodes of this Marvel show or something like that. But no, they basically did this more traditionally TV, and every episode had a different writer to it. Our cast of characters, we have starring Lisette Oliveira as Jess. She's previously done the Total Eclipse web series. Zuri Reed as Tasha, with a lot of miscellaneous TV work going back to a 2010 Law & Order SVU episode. Antonio Cipriano as Oren, with miscellaneous credits going back to 2019. Jordan Rodriguez as Ethan, who I think we talked about last time around is basically the most storied of the younger cast of characters, having done Home and Away, which is an Australian soap opera, for 214 episodes over the course of about a year. But he was also in Lady Bird, Light as a Feather, and he's been the voice of Liu Kang in a couple of Mortal Kombat animated films. Jake Austin Walker as Liam has miscellaneous credits going back to 2006, including 30 episodes of the series Rectify, as well as 11 episodes of Stargirl. Catherine Zeta-Jones as the kind of the big bad Billy, having been in The Mask of Zorro, Entrapment, Chicago, Ocean's 12, and most recently Wednesday. Harvey Keitel there in that first episode as Peter Sadusky, of course having been in stuff like Taxi Driver, Bugsy, Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Sister Act, Little Nicky, and the original National Treasure films, as well as more recently Grand Budapest Hotel and The Irishman. He hadn't been in the series yet, but obviously ends up playing a significant role over the course of the run. When we talked about him last time, Armando Riesco as Agent Hendrix / Salazar. Big twist. He was.
It'd be funny if the IMDb said that.
I think it does. I mean, it does say now Agent Hendrix / and I'm pretty sure if I clicked on it, it would be Salazar. But yes, he was in the original National Treasure films. He was also Jesse in Garden State, aka the guy who invented silent Velcro. Lyndon Smith also ended up being a prominent role as Agent Ross. She's previously been in the series Parenthood. Justin Bartha made a cameo appearance there in episode 4 as Riley Poole, reprising his role from the National Treasure films. And really I think one of the only other carryovers from the film. And then a few more that I threw in here as the series went on. Brita Wool played Casey, Billy's basically right-hand woman. She has a number of miscellaneous credits going back to 2007, including the Amazon Prime series Betas, which was one of the very first Amazon Prime shows. It was back in an era where they basically were all right, we've created a whole bunch of pilots. Now you guys vote which ones go to series. Betas was one of the ones that got a half season order or something like that. I remember watching it at the time. She was also in Mr. Mercedes and an episode of The Walking Dead. Tommy Savas, playing Dr. Zeke, has a number of miscellaneous credits going back to 2001, where his first acting gig was a role on the Sopranos episode. So shout out to that. And Jacob Vargas, playing Rafael Rios, has a number of miscellaneous credits going back to 1986, including Ernest Goes to Camp, Romy and Michelle's High School Reunion, Sons of Anarchy, and he had a multi-series or multi-episode run on the Daredevil or the Luke Cage Netflix series. So shout out to him. A little bit of trivia there. for a lot of these shows, there isn't a ton. We covered a lot of them already in the in the first one, namely like, oh hey, here are the characters that came back. But for the final episode, in the like credits sequence, I went ahead and kind of bullet pointed the little images that we get throughout, especially since as Frank and I were talking about before we started recording, they are very much like blink and you miss it. You kind of got to freeze frame them. So basically, the first one we get is an achievement unlocked Instagram post with Raphael pointing at the treasure, basically as his like first selfie. And I think like one of the comments in there is like, imagine making duck face in front of, that treasure or something like that. That is followed up by a Raphael post quoted saying TFW, aka that feeling win or that face win, depending on your lingo, I guess. That feeling when you unbury the truth, and that was basically the whole squad kind of in front of the treasure. Then we have a snippet of Liam singing Beside Me, Besides You as a #1 song on a Spotify-esque kind of portal. Then we have, again, it took me a second viewing to catch what this actually was, but Jess meets the president in a Princeton University sweatshirt. So way to dress up for meeting the president of the United States. And then that like is almost immediately cut away from or like plastered over by a picture of the president wearing a sneakers with like a hashtag sneakerhead. And then it's revealed that she's wearing, yes, also the president is a African-American female in the National Treasure universe here. And she is wearing Oren's sneakers that he had pitched earlier in the series. Then we get a quick shot at Ethan in front of the Supreme Court with also the tag of achievement unlocked. So they weren't even really original in doing that. And yeah, it's just kind of all right, he's there in front of the Supreme Court. Good for him. In a very photoshopped in front of the Supreme Court.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Then we have an image of Agent Ross with like a medal, and it's a post from Dr. Zeke. So basically bragging about like I'm with her and like my girl is like a badass kind of. I mean, I don't think they say that, but basically, and there's also like a hashtag like we met in the morgue. So cute little funny stuff there. And then lastly, we get little snippets of Agent Ross awarding like honorary medals to Tasha and Oren, and presumably one of those is like Tasha's YouTube page saying something about it. So yeah, that's the trivia we have to pull from. Frank, I'll throw it to you. Obviously, we enjoyed the series enough to stick it out. What did you think as the series continued to go on? What did you think about this one? We really only talked about like the first episode last time around, so this is kind of our chance to really recap the entire season.
Yeah, and I think you kind of nailed it too, where like, I mean, you clearly enjoyed it enough to watch the entire thing, and I was definitely interested throughout, and they throw some interesting ideas and kind of twists in there. But I feel like it never hits on like an amazing level where I'm like, oh, this is incredible, or this is amazing, or even like, oh, this is something I would like recommend to other people that they need to be watching. It's really just like, I was like, no, it's fun. And it a lot of times I thought multiple times I thought about how in the other episode we had talked about how like it is just like a CW show, mm-hmm. like with like the budget and the feeling and even some of the like drama and characters, and it that totally hit me like multiple times where it's just like it totally feels that way. And we were kind of talking about this with the actual production of it too, but it feels a lot more TV than some of the other like Disney Plus things that feel sometimes more like elevated, where this totally feels like a CBS like type of like evening show like NCIS or something.
Yeah, very much like okay, what's the case of the week as we continue on this like journey of solving this puzzle. Oh, this week's going to be the jailbreak episode. All right, here's the jailbreak episode.
And then to me, those were like the most fun episodes, is when they were like, oh, we're going to do like a heist. And then I thought the heist was more fun than the jailbreak, but I still can see like that. Those were like interesting ideas and like different kind of vibes to go for like a whole episode, which is kind of cool when like, oh, there's 10 episodes and then some of them feel kind of like way different, where it kind of focuses on like its own thing while moving the plot forward too. but then sometimes like it also it's not even just like specific moments, but sometimes the show would just dip down for me too, especially if it was just a lot of like more, sometimes it would get more into like character drama and less about like treasure
Hmm.
drama stuff, and that's totally fair. Like that's obviously how you write things and make it like interesting.
Yeah.
But there's definitely times where there's just things happening where I'm just like, whatever, like, you know.
Oh, Jess and Ethan are dancing. Oh, we're introducing a whole bunch of, artificial like will they won't they stuff that ends up it ends up breaking up the Ethan relationship.
Yep.
And then has no bearing on the the Jess and Liam relationship.
And it's just never talked about again
Yeah.
either too. And then I did kind of like that they don't do a lot with it, but they even bring that in where they like he's broken up with that other girl, but then she gets the SOS like from his
Hmm.
phone, and I'm like, oh well, that's like an interesting. But again, that's not even a lot that they even do with any of that too, because it's not like that prevents them from getting the information. They still have it immediately.
Yeah.
Like, um, so it's like I don't know, like again, like they do fun things and they have like interesting ideas a lot of the time too. Where there's things they did where I'm like, yeah, that's interesting and that's like fun, and they kept the twists going. Like I said, this I feel like had a lot better than most other shows. Where at the end of one episode, I'm totally like, well, now I want to know what's happening, like, or I want to know what the answer to whatever that is. Even in like the first three or four, when it's like, oh, somebody leaked the song, and I'm like, oh no, there's like a mole. Like I want to know what's gonna happen, and
Hmm.
sometimes I felt like the payoff was never as good as like the setup was
Yeah.
though.
Oh, the mole was Oren's shoe. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then they do that again because she's like, "Oh, I put a tracker in his shoe," and I'm like, "It's the shoe like every time." But I guess it worked the first time. Why not just do it again, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it worked the second time too, technically.
Yeah. Yeah, it it was definitely again to the like it was very TV. It was very much like all right, like it is going to end on a big cliffhanger kind of each week, um, in the hopes of bringing you back. Especially like we were talking specifically before we started recording, the final episode felt like a big step down from the penultimate episode where we get like where we do end on that Agent Hendricks turns out to be the big bad after all. He's like he's been, for who knows how long he's been like working
Mhm.
on the inside, and he is Salazar and stuff like that. And shout out to Agent Ross for like identifying that and picking up on that and trying to make the move. And then he still, gets out and then just also shows up just with a sword. Oh,
Mhm.
but even
It's the
as we're talking about it, or as I'm processing it right now, I'm like, oh, that's right. They had done a lot in the early season setting up that sword on the plane, so that's what it was. It was Cortez's sword or whatever. But yeah,
he's
like
even
even that,
staring
I
at
wasn't
it.
thinking about it in the moment. So yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's what I thought about that because it is weird that he just has a sword all of a
Hmm.
sudden, and then that's also the weapon he decides to go with.
Yeah.
And but then I realized I was like, oh yeah, he took the sword from the plane. And then there is a thing like when she's thinking about whatever, or inspecting whatever, he's like crouching down, staring at the sword. So I'm
Hmm.
like, wow, they really were like, yeah, no, we got to make all that make sense.
Yeah. But yeah, so we talked about the idea of like, oh, if they had like moved that end sequence into the beginning of that final episode, it certainly would have added some oomph to that final episode, but then you would have been lost and you would have been lacking on that like big cliffhanger ending of that other episode. So it's tricky, but yeah, I likened it to, and again, nowhere near like the quality of these kinds of shows, but like um The Wire or the Game of Thrones would often have like the next to last episode of a season would be like where all the big stuff really happened, and then the final episode would be kind of like calming down, putting pieces in place for the next season or something like that. And we kind of get a little bit of that in this show. Um, it's also like a, if you've seen the first couple National Treasure movies, it's kind of a foregone conclusion that they're going to find the treasure in the final episode. So so it wasn't like the biggest of stakes. We kind of knew what was going to happen. But then also I think because it's a TV show with a TV budget, we end up finding the treasure room, and it's, a fairly small little room, especially compared to like the cavernous thing of the Masons in the first movie and stuff like that. So it ends up being like a TV show budget treasure room,
Yeah.
that like I mean, it couldn't be, this crazy cavernous thing because that would stand out even in a swamp probably. but yeah, it ends up being like, oh, they went through all of this for, admittedly lost treasure, but it's like, a pretty small, like Nathan Drake wouldn't like, break a sweat doing, examining that treasure room or something like that. So I think that also helps play into the like low stakes feel of the final episode here. But I still enjoyed, especially like all of the coyote stuff of like the way the different traps were triggered. In particular, the one that like, made one of the guys hallucinate. So they just start shooting each other. And then just the stone coldness of Hendrix shooting Casey. And that being like the turning point to have Billy just be like, all right, I'm shooting you too. So that just kind of like eliminates all of your other bad guys. And now you're just left with Billy, who does survive. There was a moment when she's going into the like floor trap room where I was like, oh, she's definitely not going to be able to get those 3 things on her own. Are they going to, is that how they're going to kill her off? Is like, she will trigger that trap. And I had forgotten Chekhov's explosive duffel bag. So when the just room completely blows up, or that, yeah, that works too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fact that she's, she lives to, or she survives to, chase another day, break out and be an antagonist in season 2. If they go that route, it doesn't surprise me too much. And then it was also like the realization of like, oh yeah, I guess like, they didn't kill off Sean Bean in the first movie or anything like that. There people die or whatever, but it's never like the big bad. The big bad usually suffers consequences or something like that.
They get to go to jail.
Yeah. But I mean, well, in this one, the big bad of Agent Hendrix does die.
Yeah.
And it was also, I was curious at the end of the last episode. I was like, oh, I feel like they did too much of setting up the relationship between Agent Ross and Dr. Zeke to really suspect that Agent Ross was going to be dead. But she also looked pretty dead, having had that sword just straight through her body. So I was like, all right, they're going to commit to it. And then obviously we get that as like here's what Tasha and Orin are going to be doing this episode. So I enjoyed that whole arc as well. It did a good job of like giving everybody a thing to do in the finale, whether that was Ethan and Liam teaming up, or Jess and her dad and getting their little moments, or Orin and Tasha. I did appreciate that, where like even though they were split across so many planes of existence, it never felt like any of them were getting like the short end of the stick.
I thought Ethan got the short end of the stick a little bit, but just because he randomly is like, well, I'll go back and get help, and then he just disappears up until like the very, very end. And it's like you said, there's a lot of characters, because even Orin is just calling like the FBI or 911 or whatever. Like everybody has something to do, but it's like even different stake levels or whatever, But that was one where I was like, because at one point I even forgot where I was like, where did he go? Like, why is Liam here just by himself? And they're like, yeah, we just needed to write him out for like a little bit because it's only 3 steps on the puzzle.
Yeah, that's fair. The whole like, oh, I came back because I saw Billy. It's like, all right, did you, or did the writers say you did? Yeah, that's fair. And then we get the little fake out with Raphael, almost dying or whatever. And so it very much was like it very much reminded me in that regard of like Uncharted, especially like Uncharted 4, when people were like, oh my God, who's going to die after we've had The Last of Us, Uncharted's going to take a darker turn. It's like, that's not what Uncharted has been about. Like the most impactful death, as I've said many a time in Uncharted, is Jeff, the cameraman in in the second game. Like other than that, they're fully playing into like, these are invincible action hero people. Only the bad guys are going to die. So this very much kind of like fell into that same little bucket of like, yep, those are like we had henchmen kind of dying throughout the run of the series. And here we have You know, the last ones with Casey and the other guy who like hallucinates, and then the random guy that like I don't remember ever being with them the whole rest of the time, but he was suddenly there so he could be shot by the hallucinating guy.
Yeah.
Also, I especially want to give a shout out to the random sketchy looking like super haired guy that was like, you know, following them to Graceland or whatever, and like kept
Oh,
like
yeah.
popping up and like spying on them. And then he shows up to, you know, like to warn somebody or whatever, and just immediately dies. I was like, what a weird role. Like he was basically just red herring the character or something like that. He was there to be menacing looking, or you know, to put our characters at you know, at ease, or at a sense of unease, and then yep, he's just suddenly dispatched. That's it. Yeah, I'm trying to think any other moments we want to chat about. Like we talked a little bit, I guess we alluded to it a little bit, but I think in kind of what we talked about in that first episode, or if we didn't talk about it on the podcast, the episode that really kind of like locked us both in, I think, was the Graceland episode, because it was,
Yeah, for sure.
like the little like heist. The first couple episodes are a lot of like table setting, kind of like putting like meeting the characters and kind of introducing all that stuff, and then we got like the first little like, this is their version of, we're going to steal the Declaration of Independence. We're going to break into Graceland and steal a recording from Elvis. So I think, yeah, that was a fun like little the fun approach. But yeah, this show never really gets out of that like CW realm of, I know what to expect. It's that kind of show. Not a bad thing, but it's also not, you know, the prestige TV or something that you might want something like this to be. Or that like, you know, we've had, when you have like a series like Cobra Kai out there or something like that, you almost kind of like a new standard is being set for what, you know, a continuation of these kinds of stories can look like, that does a good job of like honoring what came before, but also like treading its own new path forward and whatnot. And this doesn't really like, it's a National Treasure thing in that we had a couple of characters from National Treasure and we're chasing a treasure down, but it's very much trying to just be its own thing outside. Like we wouldn't have lost a ton if we lost the National Treasure elements of it. Yeah. This would have still been all right, we're going to go on a treasure chasing adventure kind of show. Yeah. Any final thoughts? Any favorite moments? Anything else you want to give some love to before we wrap up?
I think you kind of mentioned it there, but I definitely, I mean, I do want to give a shout out to the like Graceland heist, because I still think that was like the best episode probably, or at least the most fun for me. Mm-hmm. Like that was the most where it was like fun and interesting, and it's a cool little like Ocean's 11 heist on Graceland, which is also a really interesting setting for that like I haven't really seen before. And I still think that's like not only was it like an interesting idea, it's also like the best they executed on, I think, like some of that kind of like styling of what I wish the other episodes were like more like that. Because when it kind of turns into like that, or even like the second to last episode, which is like a little bit more actiony, a little bit more suspenseful, it has like things going on, I think it's like at its peak. But then when it kind of slows down for me, when it is just a lot more of that like CW, like, you know, just normal kind of like TV show and kind of padding, it even some parts even do just feel like padding. And it's a weird, because it's also like kind of a short show, like it's 10 episodes and they're all like an hour. But then there's parts where I'm like, oh, well, we could have like not done this, or we could have not met this person or done that, you know?
Yeah.
It's funny.
I mean, there are episodes that are very much like, all right, like it almost feels like they had like a checkbox of things to hit, and they're like, all right, we're gonna do a thing. Like I very much also wonder how much of the show is inspired because of like funding they got to do a whole bunch of stuff in Louisiana, in that area. Because yeah, it's like, okay, we're gonna set this treasure. It's gonna be a Mesoamerican treasure, but we're gonna have them have brought it up to America for reasons. And we're gonna tie in, a lot of like Southern history and culture and stuff like that. So we're gonna have Graceland. We're gonna have an episode at the Alamo. We're gonna go down to Mexico, and we're gonna have a couple episodes there. Where we're gonna go into a mission. We're gonna have our prison break episode, kind of thing. But then we're gonna sneak Jess back into the country, and so even that I was like, that was a letdown for me of like, they made such a big deal about, she's a DACA person. So if she leaves the country, she's not going to be able to get back in. And so the fact that they just kind of like snuck her back in with a coyote, I was like, all right. I mean, yeah, I guess that makes sense. But also it would have been interesting if she had to, go through, or if that had been more of a challenge, I guess, than it was. But yeah, like, it was very much like, all right, we're checking all these boxes, and now we're gonna, do a final thing in the swamps of Louisiana, or was it Louisiana, Missouri, wherever it was.
I think it's Alabama or something.
Alabama, that's probably yeah. Wherever the Devil's Swamp. We're gonna make up that myth, that and we're gonna have very weirdly CGI'd fog. Yeah, it was odd, but. It was what it was. I like as soon as we kind of landed on that idea of like it as a CW version of National Treasure, I never begrudged the show for being that, because like that was what to expect. I knew what to expect, really, with that kind of framework. So even like the National Treasure movies aren't like high art. They're just mindless fun, and this is mindless fun. Thing to turn your brain off for a little bit each week, and yeah, have a good time. And then we get a little tease there at the end of some other treasures on that recording too. Like, I will say, if anything, that was like the weakest like setup for a season 2, where it's like, oh, they clearly don't know any idea of what they want that to be, so they just gave the most generic response possible, so they can go anywhere with it.
And then they act like it's really exciting, when it's not.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, all right, guys. But yeah, I wonder like if if they'll have Agent Ross more in the fold in a season 2 and stuff like that, or if they'll continue to kind of somehow be at odds or whatever. Again, who knows? She'll have to step up in lieu of Agent Hendrix's sudden death, I guess. Yeah. Anyway,
they got to get us in there as season 2 writers.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see where they go with it, and honestly, I think it'll also be interesting to see if I bother coming back to it. This certainly benefited from early in the year. Like, I'm not playing a ton right now. I'm not like there are things I'm watching, but like not enough that like I needed to bump this for other time commitments or anything like that. So it'll be interesting to see if like by the time a season 2 does roll around, am I still going to care? Am I going to bother checking in, or is it going to be well, that was nice, I don't need to see how that story continues? How about you?
Yeah, no, I feel the same way pretty much, because like I am interested in the season 2, but yeah, and then kind of like everything you're saying there is so true that like it depends on like when does it even come out, and am I going to come back? And then even if I did come back, would I watch the entire thing, or would I end up like watching like 2 or 3 episodes or whatever and being like, oh well, there's no Graceland, so just fall out. Like, yeah. I honestly think all of that's super true. And what would make me more excited is if there was like a confirmed season 2 and it was like, oh, we're going to do like an anthology thing where like each season is just some kind of treasure adventure, and you might run into people from other seasons for like an episode or something, is like as they build this like universe out that they seemingly want to do or they think is there. Because there's not a ton to work from with National Treasure. Like, there's definitely stuff there, but I feel like they tried to do the best they could with what they had. And honestly, I think they did a decent job. And I liked the characters and I liked the story, but it is totally like, oh, do you want to see these people again? And I'm like, not necessarily. And then even what you were kind of hinting at before too, where you're like, what if Billy's the bad guy again? And I'm like, well, I kind of definitely don't want that. And that's not even Billy's fault. It's just like she was fine. It's just like I don't want this exact story again. I would rather have it be like a new treasure adventure, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see where they go. As it is, there's no confirmed status one way or another if there will be another season or if it'll be canceled, whatever. It'll probably come, in the weeks ahead as they kind of like settle on how many people were actually watching this thing, how many people stuck through it, all 10 episodes or whatnot. But
I
we
would
shall
love to see
see.
the numbers on this show, and then I would love to see them compared to like The Mandalorian and like whatever the Marvel shows are. And
Yeah.
I know this has to be way less, but it's like I would be curious, like, was this still like a hit?
Yeah.
Because no one I know besides us has
Oh
seen the
yeah.
show or even knows it exists.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it is also like it is targeting a different audience than us. It is targeting that younger, audience, which is weird because that audience doesn't have any, specific affinity to the original National Treasure stuff theoretically, but
Yeah.
we'll see. Yeah, I would also be curious, like, how did this do compared to like the Santa Claus? Because obviously, I think the Santa Claus is a much more like name recognition kind of thing, and also obviously had a much more prominent like returning cast compared to this,
Yeah.
which had the briefest of cameos from. Again, as we talked about last time, I had completely forgot that Sadusky was in the original National Treasure until watching that movie halfway through. When he pops up, I was like, oh, that's right. And so like he was the last person I would have expected to be in the series, but there you go. So yeah, it's such an odd like mix of what were their expectations for this show? How did it do compared to those expectations? It like we were talking, it has a TV feeling budget. So if they made it with, limited expectations and can make another run with limited expectations and it does well enough for them, maybe we'll see a season 2. Who knows? But it was very much like, it wouldn't surprise me if they do a season 2, and it is another very localized, kind of, it's not going to be a globe-trotting kind of adventure, I imagine. But we shall see. All right. Let's dive into the report card where you grade from A+ to F. What do you want to give season 1 of National Treasure: Edge of History?
Yeah, I had to think a bit about it, but I think I'm just gonna give it a B.
Okay.
Because it is kind of like in that middle range where like it doesn't do anything that's like particularly amazing that makes me be like, oh, this is really great and this is like why it is elevated to a higher level, but it also doesn't do anything that's like super bad or awful that kind of drags it down, even though there are parts of the show that kind of drag it down for me. There's nothing that's like terrible or like unwatchable. And then that's where before watching these last 2 episodes, I was kind of in like the C plus range, C plus really. But after the second to last episode, it was when I started watching it, I was like, this is really fun. I guess I do like the show. Like I like it more while I was watching it than like it was like made me be like, yeah, this show is fun. And then after the last episode, since that is kind of like a weaker one, I was like, all right, maybe not as much.
Yeah, that's fair. With the highs of highs leave you feeling better about it. Yeah, I'm probably a C plus myself. A lot of the same rationale. Like it's never like egregiously terrible or anything like that, but it's also not doing anything that like is blowing me away. If anything, I'll say like I thought the cast like was a good, interesting young cast. I think in particular Jess, I thought was like
I like her.
For somebody who never seen before or anything like that. She did a good job kind of anchoring a show and holding her own, especially against your Catherine Zeta Joneses and whatnot. And her little like group of friends was like a good, cool, supportive group of friends. It was nice to see like even their little mini arcs, like Oren and Tasha, coming back together over the course of the season. And I will say like we talked about in the first episode that Oren like was an immediately like all right, get rid of him. He's terrible. Let him be, kidnapped or whatever. He won me over the course of the series. So shout out to that actor as well. Because I was happy to see how he turned it all around and kind of matured over the course of the series.
He becomes a much bigger help to the team in like the last couple episodes than in like the first couple, especially when he literally gets kidnapped for sneakers.
Yeah. All right. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. You have, of course, the original National Treasure film, as well as National Treasure Book of Secrets. And also, fun fact, those are going to be our next couple episodes because we're going to go ahead and keep this train a rolling. I don't know if Frank will be able to join us for those, but Logan has basically said he's interested in circling back around to those. I rewatched the original National Treasure film in anticipation or alongside kind of the first movie, so that's all very fresh in my mind as well, or first episode on this, so that's all very fresh in my mind. So you can watch those, and if you do, stay tuned for the next couple episodes of That D Plus Show. Crap, I'm realizing I've been using the wrong template for this episode the entire time. I've had the That Nerdy Site template going on, so oops. Let me swap that real quick and swap Cam's name out there for Frank. So we'll get that in by the end there. But yes, in addition to the National Treasure films, you have Jungle Cruise, Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, The Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian, The Kid Who Would Be King, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Lightning Thief. That's the film, not the upcoming series, which I'm sure will probably dethrone that eventually when that comes out. And lastly, Free Guy. Extracurriculars, you watching anything else on Disney Plus these days, Frank?
Just Andor. I finished it.
Oh, you finally finished Andor. What'd you think?
Yeah, it was really good. I really liked it. I think people kind of hyped it up a lot, but I still really enjoyed it, and I thought it was like a really good. I mean, it was just a good show, anyways. But it was a good Star Wars show, and kind of more of what I want from that, of like stepping away from the bigger like Jedi Sith stuff, and just kind of having like some smuggler type adventures. He's not really smuggling, but you know what I'm talking about. Them seedier, kind of like just people living in the universe and what's happening. And yeah, like there's a lot of the arcs, I think, in that show that are really good and interesting, because it's kind of like you described it to me before too, where it's like the first couple episodes are kind of like one arc, and then the next couple are kind of like another one, and then there's kind of like another one, and
another Prison Break arc.
Yeah, and that's the part I actually really enjoyed too. Like I enjoyed when they kind of do kind of like a heisty type thing. And I was like, that's when I started to get hooked in. And then the prison stuff I thought was really great. And I had heard that stuff was really great. But yeah, it really is when you kind of like go through it. And it feels a lot different than other stuff we've gotten, especially lately. So it's like, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it is like talking about it there. It is like, oh yeah, that's right. Andor had a heist. National Treasure Edge of History had a heist. Andor had a jailbreak. National Treasure Edge of History had a jailbreak. Why aren't more people watching National Treasure Edge of History? But yes, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I look forward to hearing maybe more of your thoughts off camera when we're done wrapping up here. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I kept meaning to like circle around and catch up on some like Bad Batch, especially I think there was like a mid-season like episode 2-parter that they did here this last week, but I am a little bit behind on that, as mostly the thing I've been watching has been like the HBO Last of Us series, which has been real good, really enjoying that. So but we will talk about that on this show.
Yeah, I thought the juxtaposition of like that being HBO's huge thing right now, and then it's like, hey, what's over on Disney Plus? Oh, we got a National Treasure TV show.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, Frank, for joining me to talk about National Treasure Edge of History, which, yes, I've also, like, in my head, as I'm saying it, I always have to remember, what is it? It's not Edge of Tomorrow, as you said, and tried to plant in my head. Edge of History. Yes, you can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you would give a shout out to there, Frank?
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to some of the Let's Plays that go up on our channel, youtube.com/thatnerdysite. Like we talked a little bit about beforehand, offline, some of the latest ones are you and Cam playing he's kind of carrying you through Elden Ring, helping you get through it. And then I like you. I think we had talked before too. You may go back to Skyrim at some point and do some like DLCs or other quests or something like that. So I definitely recommend people check those out.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, you can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, and echoing that, we've been doing some Elden Ring. We took a week off this week for Elden Ring to do, like I did a Hi-Fi Rush Let's Play of that game, as well as Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, which came to Xbox consoles not too long ago, and was like a fun little trip down memory lane. But yes, also slated, like we'll return to Elden Ring. Skyrim's always out there as like a potential option, and with Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom on the horizon, I pulled out my Switch cartridge for Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and was like, maybe I'll give this one another shot and maybe like record some Let's Plays about that, because I have historically been very like, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is a fine game. It's not the greatest game ever made, as some will tell you. I think it's fine. Not terrible, but it didn't wow me in the way that it wowed a lot of people. So we'll see if I can change my own mind on that in anticipation for the upcoming sequel. But if you liked what you heard, please remember to like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. You can follow all of the stuff we do over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.